The movie begins with a carpenter, Geppetto, and his son, Carlo, living a fun life together and enjoying each other's company. One day, as they are in a church finishing the crucifix, Geppetto realizes that warplanes are passing by and tells Carlos to pack up so they can leave quickly. While leaving, Carlo turns back to retrieve the pine cone he found. While inside the church, the warplane dropped its bomb right on the church, killing Carlo. In honor of Carlo, Geppetto plants the pine cone Carlo found right at his graveside. Geppetto struggles to let go of his loss. During his mourning, he becomes a drinker and stops working, which causes him to fail to complete the crucifix. The pine cone then grows into a pine tree, and a cricket named Sebastian, a writer, moves in to make it his new home. After 20 years of mourning and despair, he decides to cut down the pine tree that has now grown near the grave, in an attempt to create a wooden boy just like Carlo. Drunk and angry, Geppetto fails to complete the wooden boy and passes out in an attempt to climb the stairs to his bedroom. Seeing what was happening, the wood sprite decides to bring the puppet to life, naming him Pinocchio, and asks Sebastian to guide and protect him in exchange for a wish. Geppetto awakens to discover that his wooden boy has come to life, but quickly grows frightened and annoyed by his behavior, eventually locking him in a closet to keep him from destroying everything in the house. Geppetto decides to leave the chaos and head to church. He tells Pinocchio to stay in the closet. Pinocchio, wanting to go to church, breaks out of the closet and attempts to go after Geppetto. Sebastian, trying to fulfill his duties as a guide, tells Pinocchio to not go to church and that he must obey his father. Pinocchio refuses and goes to church. Pinocchio gets to church and is impressed by what he sees. The congregation, however, after becoming aware of his presence, fears him and calls him demonic. Pinocchio, trying to defend himself, tells them that he is a real boy and his nose grows. This is because he told a lie. The pastor then chases Geppetto and Pinocchio out of the church. The pastor and village podesta visits Geppetto to talk about Pinocchio and whether or not he is a threat. During their visit, it becomes apparent that Pinocchio has no discipline. As a result, the local podesta orders Geppetto to send Pinocchio to school. Pinocchio, after hearing Geppetto mention Carlo, asks Sebastian about him. Sebastian tells Pinocchio who he is and what happened to him. During the conversation, Sebastian tells Pinocchio that a burden is something painful you must carry, even though it hurts you very much. The next day, while with Geppetto in the church as he attempts to fix the crucifix, Pinocchio asks him why do people love the crucifix and not him, even though they are both made out of wood. Geppetto, unable to answer, decides to send Pinocchio to school and gives him Carlo's school book. Pinocchio tells Geppetto that he will be just like Carlo and be obedient. Pinocchio then sets off to school happily, intending to fulfill his promise. However, while en route, Pinocchio is intercepted by a circus performer named Count Volpi and his monkey Spazzatura, who try to convince Pinocchio to join the circus as he would be a star. Sebastian tries to convince Pinocchio not to go, but Pinocchio gets sold when he hears that he can get hot chocolate. Volpi makes Pinocchio sign a contract and then takes him to their circus. The village podesta arrives at the church to inform Geppetto that Pinocchio failed to turn up for school. Geppetto is confused as he knows he sent Pinocchio to school, so he decides to go look for him. Meanwhile, Pinocchio is performing at the circus and is being loved by all. Geppetto eventually arrives to retrieve Pinocchio, leading to a confrontation with Volpi that results in Pinocchio being fatally struck by a truck. In the afterlife, Pinocchio encounters Death, the wood sprite's sister, who explains that he is immortal and will be revived each time an hourglass runs out of sand. However, Death also warns Pinocchio that the more he dies, the longer he will spend in the afterlife. When Pinocchio comes back to the human world, Vlop and Podesta realize the value of an immortal being, and they both try to get him to be a part of their vision. Podesta wants him to fight in the war for fascist Italy, while Volpi makes them know that in Pinocchio's contract there is a huge release clause. Geppetto, upset and disappointed with the day's proceedings, complains and gets frustrated at the trouble Pinocchio has put him in. It then turns into an argument with Geppetto telling Pinocchio that he made him to be like Carlo. Pinocchio responds by saying he does not want to be like Carlo, but Geppetto, in his frustration, calls Pinocchio a burden. Pinocchio, not wanting to be a burden to Geppetto, decides to perform in the circus to make money for Geppetto and to avoid being drafted into the Royal Italian Army during the World War by the Podesta. Sebastian tries to stop him, but Pinocchio, as ever, is stubborn. Geppetto wakes up and is trying to apologize and explain to Pinocchio what he really meant, but then realizes that Pinocchio is gone. Sebastian tells Geppetto that Pinocchio is gone to the circus, so they both go after him. When they arrive where the circus should be, they realize that it is gone. Geppetto is now frustrated and decides that he must find Pinocchio. Sebastian gets upset and tells him that Pinocchio loves him for who he is, and he asks Geppetto how hard it is to try and do the same. He also tells him that calling Pinocchio a burden was a bad idea. While on tour, Pinocchio quickly adjusts to life as a star and he enjoys the attention. Spazzatura, the monkey, is left feeling jealous of Pinocchio. Meanwhile, Geppetto and Sebastian arrive at a golf course and try to get to the other side. Geppetto gives the sailor all the money he has left to try and convince him to cross the dangerous waters. Geppetto and Sebastian get swallowed by a giant dogfish along with the entire boat. They are now stuck in the dogfish's belly with no way of escape. Pinocchio soon after, however, begins to dislike his new stardom and misses home and Geppetto. He still continues to work hard to send money to his papa. Spazzatura, realizing that Volpe is not sending half of the money they make to Pinocchio's dad as he promised, decides to use this to turn Pinocchio against Volpe in order to reclaim his position as the circus star. Pinocchio is informed by a jealous Spazzatura through the use of puppets that Volpe is deceiving him about the money he promised to send to Geppetto. Volpe, overhearing the conversation, beats Spazzatura severely for his betrayal, causing Pinocchio to intervene in his defense and questions Volpe about the money he is supposed to send to Geppetto. Volpe gets upset and tells Pinocchio that he is a master and Pinocchio the puppet, effectively telling Pinocchio that he is now a slave. Volpe then trains Pinocchio hard for a performance that Benito Mussolini will be attending. To sabotage Volpe, Pinocchio sings a song ridiculing Benito Mussolini at a performance, which results in Mussolini ordering Pinocchio's execution and the circus's destruction. While in the afterlife, Pinocchio learns that life can bring great suffering, and eternal life can bring eternal suffering. After being brought back to life, Pinocchio is captured and taken by the Podesta to a military camp where he joins other boys being trained to fight in the war. Pinocchio becomes friends with Candlewick, the son of Podesta, who fears disappointing his father. They both share the similarities of trying to put on a brave face to hide the fact that they are afraid of the war. The Podesta then creates two teams and tells them that no matter who is the person on the other side, they are the enemy, and they should fight fiercely. The aim is to get their flag on the top of the tower first. Pinocchio and Candlewick get to be the captains of both teams, which then puts them up against each other. After the game, Pinocchio and Candlewick declare that it ended in a tie as both of them got to the top of the tower at the same time. Podesta, unhappy about this, commands Candlewick to shoot Pinocchio. At the same time, an airstrike is coming, and the boys are given a gas mask to prepare them for the war. Candlewick refuses to kill Pinocchio and stands up to his father, admitting that he is weak and scared, but still strong enough to say no. Podesta decides to kill Pinocchio himself, but fails when Candlewick shoots him in the eye with a paint gun. Allied aircraft bomb the training camp, killing the Podesta and causing the boys, including Candlewick, to flee. Volpe captures Pinocchio and attempts to burn him alive as revenge for ruining his career. But Spazzatura comes to Pinocchio's rescue, leading to a struggle with Volpe that results in all three of them falling off a cliff by the sea, resulting in Volpe's death. Pinocchio and Spazzatura are lost at sea, and Pinocchio questions if he will ever see his papa again. They see an island and try to get to it. As they arrive closer, they realize that it is a giant dogfish, and it swallows them. Inside the beast's belly, they discover Geppetto and Sebastian, who had also been swallowed while searching for Pinocchio. Sebastian comes up with a clever plan for Pinocchio to lie, in order to make his nose grow into a large branch, which creates a bridge leading out of the monster's blowhole. While trying to escape, both Pinocchio and Geppetto fall back into the belly of the monster, but then get sucked out as it sneezes. Pinocchio lands near a bomb and climbs on it. The dogfish swallows both him and the bomb, then makes its way over to Geppetto, Sebastian, and Spazzatura. Pinocchio bravely sacrifices himself by detonating the naval mine inside the beast, killing them both and saving Geppetto, Sebastian, and Spazzatura. When Pinocchio meets death once more, he insists on being sent back early to save Geppetto from drowning. Death warns him that this will make him mortal, but he still demands to be sent back. Death tells him that he is the only one who can do it by breaking the hourglass. Pinocchio smashes the hourglass and returns, ultimately drowning while attempting to rescue his father. Geppetto mourns for Pinocchio, believing that he will return from the dead like he always had. The wood sprite appears again, informing them that Pinocchio decided to become a normal boy by accepting mortality in order to save his father. Sebastian protests and says it isn't fair for all that Pinocchio did, as he gave everything he could. He decides to use the wish he gained for being Pinocchio's guardian to bring Pinocchio back to life. Geppetto finally accepts and loves Pinocchio for who he is. Pinocchio goes on to outlive Geppetto, Sebastian, and Spazzatura, just as Death said he would, and decides to travel the world to experience new adventures.